Hello, everyone. Please take your seats as we get ready to start our CEO panel. Right. We are now ready to take our game to another level. Three senior executives right now have generously agreed to provide us with their time and their insights. I will start by introducing our distinguished panel. They are Rob Normandeau. Rob is president of Seaport Capital, a Halifax-based private equity firm. Rob previously served as president and CEO of Clark Inc., a TSX-listed investment company. Prior to that, he practiced law in Ontario and in New York, specializing in corporate finance and mergers and acquisitions. In 2009, Rob was recognized as one of Canada's top 40 under 40. He served as a director of 8 TSX-listed businesses. Rob holds a Bachelor of Arts from the University of Western Ontario, a Master's of Business Administration from the University of Toronto, and a law degree from the University of Toronto. He is admitted to practice of law in Ontario, Nova Scotia, and New York. Sarah Young. Sarah is managing partner of Atlantic Canada, region of National. In this role, she provides insights and counsel to regional, national, and international CEOs, organizations, and teams. She has a unique talent for integrating communication efforts, blending traditional public relations, creative strategy, and digital tools for her clients. Sarah serves as a board member for the Nova Scotia Community College, Phoenix House, and is a YMCA for the Greater Halifax Dartmouth trustee, and sits on the Mount Allison University Board of Regents. Permjot Valia. Permjot is the founder and CEO of Mentor Camp. He is the entrepreneur in residence for Cape Breton University and advisor to numerous business and economic development collaborations throughout the region. Permjot is also an angel investor and has invested in over 30 startups in 4 countries, including Canada, the UK, South Africa, and the USA. Permjot serves on the board of several companies, including as chair of 4Deep, a company based in Nova Scotia spun out of research from Dalhousie University. Originally from London in the UK, Permjot has only just moved to Canada. He travels extensively and is passionate about economic development. Please help in giving me a huge welcome to our CEO panelists. All right, we've prepared a number of questions for each executive. We will start with a general question about your role with your respective organizations. So question 1, please describe your purpose of the organization as well as the role you play within it. Permjot, did you want to start?
Sure, thank you very much, thank you. Thanks for the welcome. I think that's the first time I've been shared like that, so thanks, that's a first. Or probably for the other panelists. I'm involved in several organisations, so if I just pick one, 4D, which is based here in Nova Scotia, what they do is that they're driven by this idea that 60% of the world's population does not have access to clean drinking water. And we produce these microscopes that can be submerged up to 4,000 meters in depth, and they can tell you straight away what the pollution levels are. They can predict an algae outbreak. They can predict how much oil and gas is in the water, or oil is in the water, etc. So that's what we're driven by. And my role there is I'm chairman of the board. And what chairman of the board means, you are providing guidance and advice and almost acting as a coach and a mentor to the CEO. It's a very rewarding role, and it's a fantastic CEO we have who's a professor, a doctor, who came out of, it came out of research, as you mentioned, from Dalhousie.
Perfect. Sarah, would you like to continue?
Sure. So I am managing partner of National Atlantic. National Public Relations is a PR firm. We have offices right across Canada, throughout the UK and the US. And essentially what we're focused on is communications and marketing, but probably more importantly, what is it that people are trying to accomplish? What are the things that, how do we connect people to things that really matter? Here in the region, what are the really exciting things that are happening? What are the things that are really complex that need to be challenged, that need to be accomplished? And how do we help make them happen? My role is leading the Atlantic team. So we have an office here in Halifax, an office in St. John and St. John's. I also have a role for, within National, the entire organization, as I lead talent for the whole firm. So throughout Canada, the US, and the UK, and figuring out as a professional services firm, what do we want to be doing in terms of recruiting and attracting the best and the brightest, and how do we make sure that as an organization that we're engaging the people that we do have. And just in terms of the boards that I sit on, Phoenix and the Y and Mount A and the community college, the role there is a little bit of a, what are the things as a board member that we're thinking about in the community, and from a governance perspective that takes care of the stewardship of the organizations.
Hi there, I'm Rob Normandeau. I'm president of Seaport Capital. Seaport is a private equity firm, which is a form of investment company formed in 2012 here in Halifax. Prior to starting Seaport in 2012, I was, as you learned, a president of a public company that was in the investment space. And during that time, we learned, the management team, that there were a lot of opportunities in Canada to acquire mid-sized businesses, family-owned businesses that were established, that were out in the market. We had a series of investments in freight transportation business, in manufacturing, in distribution companies, and we were growing them by buying small and medium-sized businesses. And what I determined was it was a really attractive space, and it was only a part of what we did at Clark. And so I had the idea that I would establish a firm that was focused exclusively on going out and buying these businesses and growing them and making them more profitable. Thought that was a really promising space. I went to a couple of wealthy families who you may know the names of, based in Atlantic Canada, the Sobey family and the McCain family, and sort of sold them on this idea that, if you want access to this part of the market, you can't really get it by buying a mutual fund or an exchange-traded fund. These are private companies that are profitable, that are well-run. The people that happen to own them now are looking for a liquidity option or a way to sell their business. We had a track record of buying several of these companies and integrating them successfully. So, convinced them that it was a great market, that it was something that we could execute on as a team. And we started in 2012. We've made a number of investments since that time. We've got 4 main companies now that we're growing. One is a construction equipment rental business based in Ontario. When we bought it, it was about 60 people in 3 branches. It's now 350, close to 400 people in 21 branches. And so that's been a real growth story, success story for us. We've got a heavy lift business based here in the Maritimes, so cranes and related equipment, and a freight transportation business. And then we've got an oil field service business based in Western Canada. And my role really is to go out, market the firm, identify opportunities, and have people call us with businesses that are for sale, do the research and analysis, try to come up with a deal with the owners, a fair deal that they're happy with, that works for us. And then, once you make the investment, manage them, help them grow, help them with daily challenges and strategic decisions and that sort of thing. So that's Seaport.
Great to hear. Our second question is, leadership is really important in a business. Describe what leadership means to you and how students can acquire the skill, as in not all of us are born natural leaders. And why don't we start with you, Rob?
Sure. When I looked at this question, I thought about the people that I know that I've experienced in my career that I thought were great leaders, and thought about some of the traits that they exhibit. And one of the things that really strikes me about people that have impressed me as leaders is that they tend to lead by example. There's not a lot of hypocrisy if they're trying to create a culture that's hardworking, that's serious, that's business-minded. That's the way they act in their day-to-day life. And so, I think leading by example is an important part of being a good leader. I think being a good collaborator, if you want the support of the people in your organization, if you want to be part of a team, or if you want to lead a team, you need to, really listen to input, understand what people's sentiments are, and, what the mood of the group is. If you don't do that, if you try to lead in a really autocratic way and cut yourself off, I think you're going to find that support that you need to be a good leader is not there. Inspiration is something that's important. You know, we've all had a good coach or a teacher or a person that's in a leadership position, and what really sets them apart is that they care. You know, they've got emotion, whether it's the topic that they're teaching or the sport that they're coaching or the business that they're involved with. They've got sort of a passion, and that really becomes contagious. And so great leaders, you know, put themselves in roles that they care about, and they demonstrate that passion, and it inspires others. And the last thing that I thought of was sort of decisiveness. You know, we've all seen people in leadership roles that sort of dither and have a hard time making decisions and lack confidence. I think a good leader, you know, part of it is you listen, you understand the consensus of the group, and you come up with a vision, but you have to be decisive, and you have to execute, and you have to move forward, and you can't second guess yourself.
Perfect. Sarah, would you like to continue?
Sure. So, and hopefully this is helpful. I often look at leadership maybe not in a more formal sense, but in a little bit of the, in the less of the usual suspects, maybe not the ones that you see on the front page of the newspaper every day. And to me, leadership, and I look at it in my organization, I look at it in, I see the receptionist. She is a tremendous leader in our organization. And I look at the people, I always look at leadership, and it's a little bit of a, what is it that someone's doing when no one's watching? What is it that what are the decisions that you're making on an everyday basis? And what is it when you rise to a challenge, when you're making tough decisions, when you make tough choices, and you don't necessarily think that anyone's watching? And that doesn't mean when you have a title beside your name, and that doesn't mean when you think that there's going to be a promotion or a raise or a job or someone applauding you at the other end. And when I watch in my organization, I'm always on the lookout, and I watch, and they can be small things. They can be when I observe that someone stayed behind to help a colleague on an assignment that they don't have to, but because they did, because it was the right thing to do. Or when someone goes above and beyond just because it's in their, it's about integrity, it's about good choices, it's about being a good colleague, it's about being a good collaborator, as Rob said. And so that's a little bit about always waking up and diving into things. And so I always, on a regular basis, when I go through a day, I'm always watching for people that aren't always going to be the ones that are going to get all of the accolades. But for me, in an organization, that's how it's always going to work best. And those are the people, and it's not always in just a company or in an organization. You're going to see them in a school setting or in a community setting or in a not-for-profit. And I guess that, for me, is a good sign of wonderful leadership, and I would hope that all of you, as you head out, whether it's traveling or looking for jobs or whatever it is, that you're seeking those opportunities where you're going to dive into something and you're going to do something a little bit more. One, because it's the right thing to do, but two, people are watching and people do take notice, and those are the things that are going to make a difference.
So, you know, I've got the difficult job of following on from that great answer. I think it depends on the context as well. So different people display different leadership styles that each organisation wants. There was this fascinating book written in the 1920s by Pareto, and we all know Pareto's rule, but he talked about lions and foxes and how you have lions being replaced by foxes, and he looked at the political cycle, and he said, you'll also, you know, Canada's a great example where I think you would have described the last Prime Minister as a bit of a fox, and you would describe Justin Trudeau as a bit of a lion. And it's that kind of cycles, and then the next Prime Minister will probably be a fox. So it depends on the context and what people in an organisation are looking for. I think leadership for me is a lot about transferring energy. And what I mean by energy is, and energy doesn't mean, you know, an extrovert. The best leaders are actually introverts. Barack Obama is an introvert, who would have guessed? But leadership, what I mean by energy is, are you inspired? Do you want to do things? One of the best leaders I ever worked with in Atlantic Canada was someone called Shannon MacDonald. and she, I think, is on the board of Mount Saint Vincent. And the way she displayed leadership was, you never knew you were working for her, but you were, and you wanted to, and she just somehow got the very best out of the people. I do a lot of turnarounds. There's a small fund management business I run in London called Flight & Partners. It's only about 20 million. And what we do is we buy companies just as they're about to fail, and we try to do a financial restructure. And the leadership style there is very, very different. It's not consensus-based. It is very dictatorial, and we make no apologies for that, but the people you're leading are willing to be led, because often there's a leadership crisis that has led to that moment. So my style of leadership works very well for a 6-month to 9-month window, but after 9 months, my leadership style starts grating and it stops being effective. And that's okay. I know my style. I know what I'm good at, what I'm not good at. When you're doing economic development, which is fascinating, you have to lead from behind. You can't lead from the front. It's very true that you can either get something done or you can take credit for it. You can't do both. And sometimes you have to make a decision. Do you want to take credit for something, or do you want to get it done? And it's been fascinating working in a place like Cape Breton, where there's a whole group of you working together, very much to Rob's point about collaboration, where the leadership style there requires collaboration. And it's been a very good growth for me. In terms of what skills should you acquire, the second half of the question, look for opportunities which get you excited. You know, that energy thing I talked about. You've seen people try to fake leadership. It doesn't work. You can't fake energy. When you do things you are passionate about and you care about, people get excited. People want to be led. But if you lead by saying, because I'm your leader, it's just not going to work. So my advice to you is find things that you really care about. People always talk about strategy, and people often forget that the third thing that really underpins, there's opportunities, there's capabilities, and there's values. And people often, when they're talking about leadership, when they're talking about strategy, they forget the values piece. And to me, that is one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. Who do you want to be? Who are you? Seek opportunities that enable you to become the person that you think you are.
Perfect. Great answers about leadership. Our third question is, what is one thing you would wish you had known when you were 20? Permjot?
I wish I knew my hair was going to fall out. I would have been much more. I would have been so much more creative with haircuts and hairstyles. You know, now when they ask you, what would you like me to do? I don't know if there's being funny and you know, having a joke, because there's not a lot you can do. There are loads of things. I think one of the things I would say to myself as a 20-year-old is, stop taking yourself so seriously. I remember I was heavily involved in student politics, and I would go to loads of these conferences and I'd argue about all of these very important issues, but you'd somehow think your voice was more important and you would represent you know, groups that you had no affiliation with, but you knew they were being oppressed. You would represent and get very angry that people weren't taking you seriously about all these different issues. And it's important, but I think, you know, I just wish I hadn't taken myself that seriously, because you can miss out on so many beautiful things. And the world is a beautiful place, and I actually think from any objective measurement, the world is getting better and better. If you look at what's happening in terms of absolute poverty, it's astonishing what's happened in the last 20 years in terms of the people living in absolute poverty. And yet, simply campaigning, simply getting angry about things, simply getting on a soapbox doesn't help. You know, how can you translate what you're doing into actions? And I think sorry, a long-winded answer. I said don't take myself too seriously, and here I am taking myself too seriously. Relax, enjoy, life is a beautiful, beautiful thing, and don't care what people think about you. Don't care.
Great answer.
I'm trying to decide if I'm going to admit that I'm not 20. So I have the benefit of having the last name Young, so usually my name shows up as Young Sarah, and I just hold on to that. So it's funny because I have the great fortune of I'm surrounded by a lot of people in their 20s, so I'm actually asked this on a regular basis. And so one of the things, I would love to go back to my 20-year-old self, and it's actually very, in some ways, similar to Permjot. So I think so write this down, write some of these things down. I think we know of what we speak. In your 20s, it's a chance to actually be yourself and not rush to the next chapter. You get to figure out who you are. And your first couple of decades, you're defined a lot by your family, by your teachers, by your parents. And so you're shaped a lot by those people, which is great. Then there's a next chapter after your 20s where quite often, for a lot of people, you're going to often have a significant other, or you're going to have oftentimes a family where then you get defined by them or attached to them, and that's going to be part of who you are. But oftentimes in your 20s, that's the one time in your life where you're just you. And you have that one window of time, quite often, where you get to explore just what you care about, what's important to you, what your values are, and who you want to be, and what's really important to you. And so you get to try things, and you get to experiment, and you get to figure out, through the lens of just yourself, what's important and what you want to be and what you want to explore and what is out there in the world. And don't rush it, because pretty soon there are going to be a whole lot of, whether it's commitments or pressures, where all of a sudden you do have things that are going to start to influence, that it's going to start to shift and change. And so I think often, and I say this looking back at my 20-year-old self, where you feel like a little bit like it's a sprint. And part of it's because those people who influence you are saying, what's your job? What are you applying for? What's the next school? Are you getting married? Are you having kids? Like all those questions, plug your ears. You don't need to rush. Take your time, figure out what's important to you. So just enjoy that time, because it's really special, and it's the only, one of the few times you're actually going to have it. And it can really, it's a defining time that really you get to hardwire for all the other chapters in your life.
I think you're going to see a real theme in the answers, because when I looked at this question, the thing that I wrote down was don't be in such a rush. So I'll see if I can elaborate on that in a way that's a little bit different from what we've already heard. But I like the first answer. I mean, I would definitely grow a man bun if I could go back in time. I mean, my haircut wasn't that different when I was a 20-year-old guy, but if I had all that hair to work with, yeah, look out. It would have been awesome, I'm sure.
I love my hair.
You know, when I looked at this question, I thought back to, myself as a 20-year-old, and I realized that I was actually a pretty serious person, probably more serious than I needed to be as well. I grew up in southwestern Ontario. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I was the first kid in my family to go to university. And I really was focused on making the most of that opportunity, and quite driven. I remember going to the guidance counselor in high school and saying, well, here's my transcript. What job can I have that pays the most money? That's really, what drove me and drove my course selection. And, I didn't really look for things that were sort of designed to make me a more well-rounded person. I was on a career track from a very early age. And when I went through at Western, when I went to University of Toronto, I took the combined program so that I could get out a year earlier. Didn't take any elective courses, really took only core subject matter. And, I didn't, at the time, it didn't seem like I was missing anything at all, because I was getting sort of to my destination quicker. I was, out in the workforce at least a year earlier than really I needed to be. And what I didn't get to do was what some of my friends did, was travel, take the elective courses, have maybe a little bit more extracurricular activity, and I think I would have really enjoyed that. And when you reach a certain point in your career, that track is you're down the path. I've got 3 kids now. Maybe when they're gone, I can travel a little bit, but that would be the one thing. don't be in such a rush. The other thing that I would say to my 20-year-old self is try to maintain those relationships that you have as a young person. It's very difficult to sort of rekindle them. I'm going to a high school reunion next summer, which I'm looking forward to. And some of us that were closer friends are going to spend a long weekend together in a cottage. But I think it's much easier now than it ever has been to maintain those relationships with social media and other things. But the friends that you have when you're 18, 19, 20 are friends that, if you're lucky, you'll keep for life. And so spending a little bit of time throughout your busy life maintaining those relationships, I think, is something that you'll really be glad you did.
Great advice, great advice. Our fourth question is, could you please describe 2 or 3 things that have led to the success of your career in your life? Rob, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure, yeah. So when I was leaving for university, I remember I asked my dad for a little bit of advice. My dad was a steel worker, very quiet guy. He's not the kind to give advice. My mom would give me advice, hourly. But my dad was not the type to give a lot of advice. But he said, and this is probably the best advice anyone ever gave me. He said, work hard, don't be an asshole. And those are really the 2 guiding principles that I try to lead my life by. And it's amazing, how many people don't do one or both of those on a regular basis, right? Daily, right? So, as I said, I worked really hard. When I was in university, I don't think I missed any classes. If I did, it was because I was sick or something. I always did all the reading. I always did all the extra reading. And when you do that, you put yourself in a position to succeed. I don't know if any of you have read Malcolm Gladwell's business book, Outliers, but, he goes through a bunch of series of, backgrounds and experiences that have led to people that are super successful. And the bottom line is, I'll save you the $20 and the 15 hours of reading it. If you work hard, you have a much better chance of succeeding. And so that's what I've done in my life, and it has put me in a better position to succeed. The other thing I had, I think, in abundance as a young person was confidence. I was able to go into some situations where I probably should have been a lot more nervous than I was. I wrote the New York State bar exam, having prepared for it for only 8 weeks, was able to pass that. I wasn't paralyzed by self-doubt, and my mom said, because you're an arrogant little prick, is what she would probably say. But if you believe in yourself, you give yourself a chance to succeed, and that's something that I've been able to do in my life. And luck. I've had some good luck, some good fortune, and being able to take advantage of good luck when it stares you in the face is something that you need to be able to do. I mean, when I was practicing law for a big Toronto firm, I worked for 6 or 7 months with a guy on a large transaction. He went off and joined a New York State firm. He came back and he recruited me, and that was in my career development. That being going into that big U.S. law firm and practicing M&A and corporate finance for a number of years. That was something that was really formative for me, but it was just luck. The only reason they came and dialed me up is because this guy knew me. We played on the same beer league hockey team, and we worked together for 6 months, right? So you gotta, when those opportunities present themselves, you gotta jump on them, because we all get a little good luck, right? But what I've noticed is some people don't take advantage of it.
Sir?
So, what are the factors? So I think one of the things, I'm a really good listener. So I listen. Throughout my career, I've been able to read rooms. I listen really well. I listen intently. And so that's really impacted how I provide counsel, how I lead teams. Part of the way I've led, and this is no matter what my role and what organization I've been involved in, is, and this part of this is what I believe in, but also what I've been told is, it's a little bit about bringing out the best in people. I believe that my job is a little bit about how do I set other people up for success? How do I build capacity in other people? How do I make sure that each person can be their best self? And if they aren't, I need to figure out how to unlock their potential. And that's part of what I love to do. I love figuring out how are people going to be really great. And so that's a little bit of the setting people up. The other thing is, I really believe in the power of the collective. So I think that if you put the right people in the room, you can figure anything out. And so whether it's my team, I do there's this ongoing joke of my team doesn't make sense on paper. You get these really different people who have vastly different perspectives, wildly different areas of experience and expertise, and you put them in a room and you want really different experiences and viewpoints. But magic happens when you get people in a room like that. But that's also the work I've done too, is if you get something really complex and really challenging, it's how do you figure out, how do you get people? And it's work like economic development. It's some of the challenges our region and our country are facing is that I just believe in if you can pull different people together, you can solve great big problems. So I've always believed that, so it's the power of the collective. And then probably it's a little bit of just making things happen, and it's the hustle and it's the hard work. And at the end of the day, no matter what, when you're starting out, or no matter what your job is, or what your title is, you have to roll up your sleeves and work hard. And I have tried to do that at every level, and there are moments I've always said that at the end of the day, I'm responsible for the lights being on or off, and I've taken that responsibility to heart.
Great to hear. Permjot, would you like to comment?
I think be likable. And I think what I've tried to do, and I've read books on being likable, and I still need to read a few more, but people underestimate how important being likable is. And they also underestimate how being likable is something you can actually work on. Listening skills, great example, where salespeople, there's this big myth that, it's good salespeople have a gift of the gab. Actually, the best salespeople have gift of the ear. They listen. If you want to be good in sales, have 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them in that proportion, and you'll do very, very well in life. So be likable. There are lots of things you can do to be likable. And I'd also say network effectively. I think most people who think they're networking are not networking. They're just doing a terrible job just handing out business cards at an event or something. And I think to network effectively is about thinking, what can you do for someone else? I remember there was this one event, and it was pivoted in my career. There was this one event I went to when I was in my late 20s, and there was somebody that I really, really wanted to speak to. And there was this whole crowd had descended on this person, because after she was a speaker at this event, everybody had descended. And I'd done a little bit of research and found out that she was very passionate about this particular charity that I actually had a real interest in. And everybody was going up to her and giving her a business card saying I could do, doing a pitch. And I remember going up and I said, how do I differentiate myself? And I remember going up to her, and I'd done the homework, and I said, and this is to your point about working hard and being ready. And I remember saying to her, I know you're involved in this charity, it's something I'm very keen on. How can I get more involved in that charity? And I remember she then said, okay, give me 10 minutes. If you don't mind waiting here, let's have a proper conversation. And that was it. And then 4 months later, her husband and me and we went to India together on a trip to something to do with this charity. But it's about just seizing those opportunities when you get them and just network effectively. Think, if you do have 30 seconds with someone that you really, really want to meet, how do you spend those 30 seconds? So network effectively, do your homework, be likable. The thing that I've tried to do is every year, when we do these New Year resolutions, which we have to do, I always try to think, do something that scares you. And every year, so 1 year I did the marathon, London Marathon, which it did scare me, and I'll never ever do it again. But I'm so, so glad. Actually, I think it was the last time I cried, when I succeeded. Generally, there's something, I don't know if any of you have done marathons. The first time I ever done it, and as you can tell, I'm not built to run marathons. But when I finished the passing line, I don't know what it was, I just got so emotional because it's an achievement that only you own. Nobody else can share in that achievement, and it really is mine. It's nothing to do with physical fitness, it's all to do with mental fitness. And I just remember doing that, and it's something I would never do again, but I'm glad I've done it. But you have to do things like learn a new language, go somewhere that you think, wow, that'd be scary to go to that place. Because you can visit safer places places that speak English, for example, when you're older in life. But when you're young, just do stuff. So try to do something that scares you. If you don't get scared about things, and again, this comes up to the earlier question about leadership as well. You've got to push the boundaries sometimes, whilst being scared, giving confidence to others that it isn't that scary. I mean, when you're doing crisis management, I was working in a company in London, and I just happened to be in charge 7th of July when all the bombs went off, and London had come to a complete standstill. I was terrified. The staff in the room were terrified. They didn't know how they were going to get home. They didn't know if it was safe. We were in Covent Garden in central London. And that was my first real exposure to leading in a crisis. And that's when I realized I actually enjoy turnarounds. I enjoy crisis management. But it was a horrific thing to go through. But make the most of the opportunities. Whatever happens, just seize them. Sorry, I'm going off track. And the other thing is, to Rob's point about luck. All of us get, some of us get more luck than others. Most of us are exposed to luck. But the difference between, I think, successful people and people who don't make the most of it is some people are better prepared for luck. Some people aren't. I remember when I did my first bit of business. I remember doing the deal. It was a really, really good deal. And I told somebody about it and said, well, if you want to do it, we can get you in on it as well. And I remember them saying to me, if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it. And I just remember at the time I was listening to a song by Seal in 1991, and the song was, in a world full of people, how come only some want to fly, isn't that crazy? And it was just weird, it was that connection between what they had just said and that song. And I always remembered that, yeah, the world is full of crazy people, but only some people want to fly. Be one of those people that want to fly, and it doesn't mean, hustle, wake up every morning, what am I going to do today, conquer the world, all that jargon, which is just crap. Just when luck hits you in the face, take it, seize it, because so many people won't. And that is often the difference, because you sometimes hear stories about really successful people. And I ran the Entrepreneur of the Year in London for Ernst & Young, and what was fascinating was when you talk to the entrepreneurs in the interview room, they give you the story. We had this strategy, I had this vision, I knew what we wanted to do, and we stayed. And then you meet them privately, and they said, I didn't have a clue what I was doing. And what happened was, this happened, and then a friend of mine said, hey, could you do this service? Because if you could, I'd pay you for that. And then they evolved into a very, very, and that happens all the time. But people don't want to tell you that. People want to tell you, no, we wrote down this strategy, we had this vision, and we were committed to that vision, and that's what we did. And that's what gets you awards, by articulating a really, really good story. And for success, I think just make the most of luck when it be prepared for luck, because all of you will experience luck. Every single one of you in this room will experience luck. The difference will be how you respond to that opportunity.
Very great advice, very great advice. Our fifth question is, we are taught that mentors are critical to launching and navigating our career. But for new graduates, it sometimes seems very difficult to find a mentor. Did you have a mentor in your early career, and how did that person become your mentor? Permjot, did you want to start? Or Sarah, did you want to start? Evan?
Sure. So I've been very fortunate. I've had a number of mentors. First, I would say, for me, mentors have been present, but mentors for me haven't been the mentors that I've had to meet or talk to on a monthly or sometimes even on a yearly basis. They've set the tone for my career or even my life, and it's almost like being a touchstone for me. And so one of my early mentors was one of the first MPs, female MPs in Canada. And I met her when I was about to graduate from grade 12. And it was actually very similar to what Permjot just outlined, is that she was the chair of the National Capital Commission in Ottawa. And it just so happened that it was the lead up to Canada 125, which I am now acknowledging that I am not 20. And that as we approach Canada 150. And she was in my small town of Pictou, and which was very odd to have someone from Ottawa coming into the gym in Pictou. But she came in and did this speech, and at the end I went up and asked her some questions, and they struck her, and later I had the gall to write a letter and say, I wanted to work that summer in Ottawa. And I didn't know anything better that was gutsy to do. Next thing I know, I get this call from Ottawa saying, who are you? And apparently, we've got a job for you in Ottawa, and we have no idea why the chair of the National Capital Commission has said, you've got a job for you. And so I get to Ottawa, and all these people keep asking me, who are your parents? And I do a Carol and Gordon from Pictou, Nova Scotia, who are no one. I mean, they're my parents, but... and so she became this wonderful mentor to me because she just had this wonderful persona that she was a trendsetter, a trailblazer. But one of the most important things that I've always remembered, that two really important things that have been a touchstone for me. One was July 1st, huge event in Ottawa. It was then, is now. The whole city is packed. There are hundreds of thousands of people. Everyone's down in Parliament Hill. The National Capital Commission is the host for the event. One of the big things is once the event ends, the whole downtown city is covered with garbage because there's a huge party. So Jean Piggott, who at that point is the chair, she's the host, she would get up quietly, no one knew this, I found out because I worked in the office as a summer student. She would get up at 3 in the morning to go hand out coffee to the people picking up the garbage. And she did it just because it was the right thing to do. And she knew that the people who had to pick up the garbage were as important as the people, the Prime Minister who was on the stage, and all of the VIPs who were at the reception. And so I always did that's what a leader does. That's what a leader celebrates every single person who is involved in an organization and makes things happen. So thing number one. She also, when I asked her, here I am, I'm in grade 12, what should I go do? What is your advice? And she started talking about jobs and roles and things that I had never heard of in my life. I didn't even know they existed. And so it struck me that there are things, and I would challenge you, there are things right now that you don't know that exist. And so I tell my kids this right now, there are jobs, there are things right now that you don't even know that are out there. So before you decide or get too locked in, figure out, go try things and ask people what they're doing, because there are really interesting things that you're not quite aware of. And so I've always, she's since passed away, but for me, she was always someone that she was a trailblazer, one of the first women in the House of Commons, but she always had this real persona and sense of self. And while she would gutsy and could hold her own in any room, she also did it in her own style and the way was really comfortable in how she wanted to do things.
Do you want to continue?
I think you find people, you find weaknesses in some of the skill sets, or you find somebody that is doing something that you want to do 2, 3, 4 years ahead of you. And I think it's very important that when you look for mentors, you look for mentors who are only 4 or 5 years ahead of you when you're young. And as you get older, you can look for people 10, 15, 20 years ahead of you in terms of how they get there. So I think do find mentors. But it's a very informal thing. It's very rare. I was fortunate. I had some great mentors in my life. But none of them, they weren't mentors. I would never say to them, oh, will you agree to be my mentor? Whereas I find increasingly people are using that language with me. Will you be my mentor? And I don't know what I'm agreeing to. When people say that, because I don't know, I mean, I'm happy to have coffee with people, etc., etc. But I also find people increasingly, and this is advice in terms of when you do find a mentor, don't be transactional about it. Sometimes when people say they want mentors, what they really want is, can you introduce me to this person? Can you introduce me to that person? And that's not mentoring. That's, just look at LinkedIn and, ask to be connected. That's fine. But if you do want to find a mentor, find someone that you think, they're doing something that I'm passionate about, that I want to do. I want to follow that trajectory. And those conversations really help. And all of us have some insecurities. All of us have insecurities. And some of the best mentors can just help you chip away at those insecurities. And I've had some great mentors. One of them has now become a business partner, Howard Flight, in the UK. And I remember him giving me an opportunity to take part in what was a very closed world, fund management in London. So we started a fund management business together. And I remember him looking at me, and he's an incredibly intelligent guy. And him looking at me, and we were just going through a document, and I just said, well, this could mean this or this. And he just looked at me and he said, you're incredibly bright, aren't you? You should be an equal partner with me. And that was it. That was just my interpretation of some language. And he said, you should be an equal partner. I was hoping to get 5% in his venture, not 25%. There were 3 others, so all of us have 25% of this venture. And that is, again, luck. But that is, again, being ready for the luck. So find some mentors, but again, make sure it's going to be an enjoyable experience for the mentor as well. What is it you want from them? What is it you want to get? How can they help you? How can you help them? Because it's going to be rewarding both ways. There's nothing worse than being a mentor to someone. I do a lot of mentoring for companies. There's nothing worse than not being listened to. I don't mean that from an ego point of view. I mean that from you don't like my advice, which is fine. But then don't keep asking for a meeting when I say the same thing and you agree and then you do nothing about it. That's just a waste of time for everyone. So mentoring is very important. Find mentors and make the most of the opportunities. Again, there's constant themes in, I think, what most of us are saying, that there are 1 or 2 North Stars that we all have, that we are guided by. So that's the thing that I'm guided by.
I haven't been fortunate enough in my career, I don't think, to have a single mentor that sort of guided me and give me advice. I think that's a very rare thing. So I know people in this world that have had that experience, and for them it's been very meaningful. But I think, you shouldn't be disappointed if you don't have someone that's your guardian angel that gives you advice and opens doors for you and sort of wise counsel whenever you need it, because I think it's very hard to find a person like that. And I think it's harder now than it's ever been. 25 years ago, people came out of university, they would join a corporation or a professional services firm or some other business entity, and they would stay there for much of their career. And there were formal and informal mentorship programs set up to help people, navigate their career. It's a different world today. People move around, they change careers, they change roles, they change disciplines. And so I don't think, even if you had access to a person like that, I don't think that person would be able to give you all the advice that you need and the support and the mentorship, because your needs will change over the course of your career. And so in a way, it's almost liberating not to have, maybe I'm just making excuses because I don't have one, but what you need to do, and what I've tried to do throughout the course of my career, is find advice and support and direction. The kinds of things that a mentor will give you, you need to do it and seek it and find it on a situational basis. And I've learned that, people are much more generous with their time and with advice, and people, good people want to help. And even if you don't have an existing relationship like Sarah, I didn't have a lot of connections, but I've been able to get in front of people that have been, perfectly suited to my needs at the time. But the one thing I think you have to do, and this relates to something Permjot said, you need to really be genuine when you go and seek advice. You can't go to someone and say, you're a really important person, you've got a lot of experience, can you give me something? Can you give me a job? Can you, open a door for me? Because people are very reluctant to do that. Unless you have a relationship and some, pre-existing connection to the person, they can't just go out and help, everyone that comes in their door. But if you really want to pick their brain and get advice and get direction and come out of that meeting with a bit more information and maybe some inspiration, people generally do that. When I was first contemplating starting Seaport, I sought the advice of 2 very important people in the industry that I had no prior connection to. One of them was Brent Belsberg. He is the founder of TorqueWest, one of the leading private equity firms in Canada. He did it, really when it was in its inception. Very successful guy. I had a meeting with him. He spent an hour and a half with me and gave me all kinds of great advice. I haven't really spoken with him since then. I'd love to connect with him again, but I haven't needed his advice. And, the fact that he was able to do that was really profound. He said, this is a great idea. You should do it. Here's how I would do it. Here are some of the challenges. And that was great advice. The other guy, I won't say his name, but he told me it was a terrible idea. I wouldn't do it. I think, this path you're headed down is not the right path. Small and medium-sized businesses aren't that promising. And so, I was really fortunate to get that perspective as well, because a lot of the things that he identified were real concerns and things I had to address, areas that I had to avoid. So, I think, to sum it all up, I would say, if you're not lucky enough to have a mentor, don't despair. Get out there and ask people for advice. And if you're looking for advice from somebody and they're not responsive, find somebody else that's just as good. And when you go there, don't have an agenda that's unrealistic. Don't expect it. Sarah was very fortunate. That's rare. I mean, I've asked people for jobs. They've never given me a job like that. She's, I guess, more engaging than me for sure. But, have a realistic expectation. What are you going to come out of that meeting with? It's probably advice is the best you can hope for, but advice can be very powerful as well.
Great advice about mentorship. Our sixth question is, how did you incorporate innovation into your corporate strategy? Sarah, do you want to start us off?
Sure. So innovation is just it's a little bit of the air in which we breathe, and it's the wallpaper in our culture, and we very deliberately we've done that, and we've actually done it as part of the mandate of the Atlantic region. And so one of the things that we tasked as part of our business strategy is Atlantic Canada is only so big. It is only growing so fast. So what if we were to expand? What is one of our really easy opportunities, or what can we pursue in a really deliberate way? And it was around, we are doing work that is already seen as innovative with our clients, but we have this network with our colleagues right across Canada, in the US and in the UK. And so a couple of years ago, we very deliberately said, we will be the innovation hub for our company. And so we are now known as the innovation hub, the center of excellence here in Halifax for our company. And so when you go, and this is really interesting, that when you go to Toronto, when you go to London, when you go to Boston, in any of the offices, people will say the best work, the most innovative work is being done in Halifax. And one of the things that's really fascinating is that, and we do work with clients where we say, here in Nova Scotia and Atlantic Canada, we need to rise above. We need to stop talking about the things that can't be done. We need to challenge the narrative that's taken place. We need to go out into the world with more confidence. And it was really fascinating for me when I watched my team say, well, is it actually true? Can we hold our own in boardrooms in Toronto? Or are we limited by geography when it comes to Boston? And so we actually had to go through our own psychological exercise almost. And what we're seeing right now is that, and really fascinating, and I would also encourage everyone here as you graduate and you will be competing, or you will be among peers right across the country and other places, is that you do hold your own. And certainly we're seeing right now is that sitting here, my colleagues today, I have colleagues in Boston, I have colleagues in Toronto, and I have a colleague in London as well, and they've been brought over because they are best in class. And we have people coming in next week from Boston and Toronto and Montreal to be trained, and this is all based on innovation. And so it's pretty amazing to hear that it is about Halifax being an innovation hub. So when it comes down to do we think about it? Absolutely. It's an integral part of our business strategy, and there's work that's being done right across the world, right here in Halifax, all because some of the best minds and most creative minds exist here in the city.
Perfect. Rob, would you like to comment?
Sure. So, when I talk about innovation, I used to think that innovation wasn't really an important part of our corporate strategy. And, the reason for that is we're not really invested in high-tech businesses. We tend to invest in old economy companies. That's really our focus. So, at the outset, I talked about transportation, equipment service businesses, simple manufacturing businesses. These are the companies that we focus on. And I've never really been a person that was all that interested in technology, so I was a little bit blind to innovation and disruption. But that changed with one meaningful investment we had at Clark, where I was before. We had a significant investment in a company called Cinram, and Cinram was a business that manufactured DVDs and CDs. It started in 1969. It was a real Canadian success story. The founder was a guy named Isidore Philosophe. He started it in his basement, basically, in Montreal. They did cassettes and 8-tracks, and they did a very good job with the logistics and the manufacturing. They became a leader in the space. In 2003, they bought the manufacturing assets of Time Warner, so they had, really the largest DVD, CD replicating business in the world, hugely profitable. And so I ended up with I was at a company that had a significant position in that business. I was on the board of directors. That's one of the 7 TSX listed companies that I served on the board for. And we were always presented with ideas that innovation is important. We need to be aware of disruption in the industry. I never paid enough attention to it. They paid, as I said, $1.1 billion for those assets. They made huge money for them. In 2010, the business started to decline a little bit. We had access to all kinds of experts. I went down to Harvard for a meeting with a guy that's at the Harvard Business School. He's a futurist. He was on the board of Intel. And we spent the whole day with him. He said, this is in 2009, I believe. He said, in 6 or 7 years, physical media, so DVDs and CDs, will be obsolete. People will stream all their music on the internet, and people will download movies directly to their TV. And I remember walking out of that meeting, and I said to the guy with me, I said, that guy is full of shit. There's no way that'll happen. I was in the Cinram, studio where they had a direct connection to Time Warner. They were downloading a Blu-ray movie. I don't even know if Blu-ray exists anymore. It took 2 hours. I said, there's no way anyone's going to sit. You could go to Blockbuster and be home and have a bag of popcorn before that movie downloads on your TV. I just didn't believe it. And of course, you probably know where this story goes. In 2012, the company filed for bankruptcy because, partly because they lost their Time Warner contract, but also because they got sideswiped by disruption. They were a leader in the business of replicating DVDs, manufacturing, CDs. They did an excellent job at that, but all of a sudden that didn't matter, right? And so that was hugely formative for me. We always thought that these old economy businesses, manufacturing, distribution, moving things around, making things, we thought that in some way that was insulated. Like, we weren't doing apps, we weren't doing IT stuff. We thought that we were protected in a way from disruption, but clearly we weren't. So now when I look at our businesses, it's a huge part of our strategy. We try to get knowledgeable because it's not something that we have a background in. But one of the companies that we're involved with is, as I said, a construction equipment rental business. It's a very profitable business, but we've noticed recently that there are Uber-type businesses starting. So if you think of every construction firm in Nova Scotia, they've all got their own equipment. There's smart people out there trying to develop apps and other software programs that can connect people that have excavators with people that need excavators. And so if you're a construction equipment rental business, you should worry about that. So we're focused, when we sit with our senior management teams, we talk about what are the things that we can do to add value that goes beyond that service, right? And if it's the best solution, how do we adopt it? How do we sort of get on board? And so I think that a bit of the arrogance and blindness that I had earlier in my career has been replaced, and now I worry a lot about disruption, a lot more than I ever did. And I think if you don't, you're not thinking about it right.
If I may, I'll just tell you a very quick story. When I was in my 20s, I worked as a sales rep for Fujifilm, and these thing called digital cameras had just started, and we were worried, obviously, about what this might mean for film sales, traditional film sales. So we hired a consultant. And one thing you'll learn about consultants, and I say this as a consultant, we tend to tell you what you want to hear, or you interpret what we tell you as what you want to hear. And we hired this consultant to tell us, does film have a future? And so this consultant did a great deal of work and came back and presented to us. And he presented that we were safe because most people take films, most camera users which use film were women, and they normally took photos on holiday. So number one was when children were born, number two is when holidays. You take loads of films there. And what happened is that people would take loads of photographs, they would then send the film off to be processed, then the photos would come back a lot of people here in this room are thinking, what? Photos would come back, and then you'd all sit together as a family and relive the holiday experience. So what this consultant said was, digital is too instant. It doesn't allow people to relive the holiday, and people always want to relive the holiday. So we thought, great, we're safe, and then obviously, as you know, the rest is history. But the point there is, there will always be people telling you why innovation isn't going to affect us. How many times do I hear, yes, I think it is very important, I think this is very, yep, I get it, this is really good. It doesn't affect me, it doesn't affect us, but I think it is important. You hear that so many times. And innovation doesn't just mean technology. When we did our fund management business, we innovated the business model. So we created something that never been done before. We created a virtual fund management business, which ended up being highly profitable, very, very profitable. We make a lot of money. Something like 90% of the income fee was pure profit. At the time, the traditional margins were 12 to 15%. So we had gone from a 12 to 15% model to a 90% model through innovation. So innovation doesn't just mean technology. Innovation can be business models. And if you think about what Uber have done, the technology almost came afterwards. It was they disrupted a business model. So I don't think of innovation just in terms. SpaceX is not just about technology innovation. It's actually a huge business model disruptor. It's basically saying to NASA, the challengers, going to governments and agencies and saying, why don't you outsource NASA to a private company? And that's a huge disruption in business. And I think we hear about innovation, all of us, and you know, most people in this room are of a much, much younger generation than myself. So don't just think innovation is just around technology, it's around all kinds of things.
Don't be scared of innovation. Our final question, if you were asked to give one piece of advice to students and new graduates, what would it be? Or Rob, did you want to start? Or?
Sure, I've sort of sprinkled little bits of advice throughout my talk, so I'm going to keep it fairly straightforward and give you guys the advice that my dad gave me when I was maybe about your age. And you know, I don't set the bar as high as Permjot. He said be likable. I don't aspire to that. I just said work hard, don't be an asshole. If you can do that, I think you'll find that you'll have a lot of success.
Perfect.
So I offer this on a regular basis to my colleagues, and even in my household, is momentum over perfection. So every day, if it's just keep moving, make things happen, and if you have a little bit of momentum, it doesn't matter what it is, amazing things can happen when you've got momentum on the move. So it doesn't matter what it looks like. Momentum is much trumps perfection any day.
Take care of yourself. And what I mean by that is develop a good relationship with yourself. Take care of yourself emotionally and physically. The investments you make now in your personal well-being, mental and physical, will really, it's the number one investment you can make. It really, trust me, I say this as a 47-year-old, it's the biggest investment you can make in yourself.
Perfect. Thanks to each of our CEO panelists for their time and insights. We have a small token of appreciation for you.
Thank you very much to our CEO panelists. Lunch will soon be available, and there will be held here in the Rosaria Multipurpose Room. We would like to recognize once again the Center for Women in Business as our major conference sponsor and thank them for their generous contribution to our event. Before I invite you to help yourselves to lunch, I have two small announcements. First, I want to draw your attention to the various booths that are set up to the side of the room. CPA, Enterprise Car Rental, the Center for Women in Business, and the Mount Recruitment Office have set up information booths, and I encourage you to network with their representatives over lunch. Secondly, I want to remind you to please return to this room by 12:55 as our lunch keynote speakers will begin at 1 o'clock. There are bag lunches at the back of the room. that have a variety of sandwich options as well as vegetarian options. The labels on the lunch bags will indicate to you these options. Please do not open the bags to check the contents. Once you finish your lunch, please discard your waste in the garbage cans provided of the room so that the tables are clear for our keynote speakers later on. Thank you very much.